Hi everyone, my name is Saebra Pipoly and I'm the owner and founder of Hoofalls and Footfalls. And today we are going to be interviewing a fellow professional equestrian that's not only kind of involved in the equine assisted activities and therapies industry, but also in more of the traditional mainstream equine industry. And I'll let Mr. Frankie Lovato tell you more about himself. So welcome and thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you for having me, Saebra. Pleasure to be here and be a part of this. So anyway, my name's Frankie Lovato. I raced professionally under the name Frank Lovato Jr. I rode professionally for 25 years. I was an Eclipse award-winning jockey. I got a lot done, above average in career. I made it 25 years, which is a long time for the average jockey.
Wow.
But during that time is when I sustained a bad injury, and that'll lead into how the Equicizer came to be. But anyway, I was a professional jockey, and I got to see a lot of things and do a lot of things, and especially ride a lot of horses.
That's awesome. So you said that you were in that for about 25 years, which is a long time. What's kind of average career for a jockey for those that aren't familiar with that?
You know, there's really no statistics, but if I was to guess from an evaluation standpoint, it's probably like 2 or 3 years.
Really? Wow.
And that sounds incredible. And I always say there's 3 things that shortens a jockey's career. And first is you outgrow it. Most people aren't meant to be, like 110 pounds strong enough to ride a racehorse. And because of the having to maintain the weight, that burns you out pretty quick and also is very healthy. So I think that's one of the main reasons why jockeys' careers are so short. The other one would be the injuries that you sustain during your career. Some of them are ending. I mean, it's just you're done. There's no getting back to it. And others are just discouraging enough to, or with the intimidation of getting hurt again, or the risk of getting hurt again, depending on the injury. I think that also changes your mind of like a career move from that point. And the other one's just being defeated. And when I say that's a very strong word, but jockeys, even the best jockeys, lose 90% of the time.
Wow.
And if you're not winning, and if you don't have the clients and you don't have the good horses, it basically, you wonder why you do it. And it requires every ounce of your energy and your time, your dedication, and you're risking your life, and you're going through weight management in most cases. So all those things, it becomes discouraging. And I think a lot of them just drop out because they just can't make a living. The average jockey makes less than minimum wage. It's crazy. So there becomes a reality to it. And that's why the 3 things that I mentioned, the main things, is why I would say that most jockeys don't have a career that goes on as mine.
Right. And how did you get started as a jockey?
My dad was a jockey as well. So, and that's where the Frankie came from, because I tagged along with him ever since I was 3 years old to the racetrack, to the barn area, around the horses, around the trainers. And this is a big secret. My birth name is Sean. And nobody would ever remember the name Sean. And they always just called me Little Frankie. And so I was forever. I was more Frankie than I ever was Sean. My family still calls me Sean, but I adopted the name, and I actually don't like the name Frank.
Okay.
Frankie. I mean, Frankie kind of like softens it up a little bit, but it's a little funny story behind it. But
that's really cool. That's neat. So that's awesome. That's really cool. Beginning in the industry and that long of a career. And so the reason why I wanted to do the interview with you is I personally want to learn more about kind of your special project, your thing that you've created, which is the Equicizer. And I know instructors and centers that are in the equine assisted activities and therapies industry, Equicizer might be something that they have personal experience with, but I know for a lot of them, it's kind of just, we've heard about it and what is it and how can we use it? So what is the Equicizer and how did you even come up with this awesome thing that is on the screen behind you.
Yes. So how this all started,
Mm-hmm.
it really goes back to when I was a little kid. I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't have a horse in the backyard. Racetracks are generally around the big cities, and my dad was racing. So although I was around horses, I didn't really have access to them and riding. So from a very young age, I was saddling the couch and the chair, and as I got older, I would try to build things and I would make things. I love to work with wood. So that was kind of like I dabbled in it. But I left home at a young age. I was 14 years old to go work on a farm in Ocala, Florida, to learn the skills to be a jockey, which requires a lot of horses and a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be licensed professionally by the time I was 16,
Wow.
So this was the late 70s. It was pretty normal for kids to get started at that age, at 16. And then you also had to worry about outgrowing the job. So you're not fully at 16. It was a race to kind of get some riding in and make sure you didn't, by the time you were 19, you weren't 6'2" and 190 pounds.
Right.
Anyway, that goes back to how the Equicizer was started. I had in my head, I used to build things. And then as you're starting to develop and learn the riding techniques that you need for riding racehorses, it's generally just slow exercises. You're very controlled rides. You're not racing. So most all the training that you're doing you're not learning the skills of race riding. So I used to saddle bales of straw and pretend that they were, like I would put a saddle on them and I can do the riding and practice my whipping and hand reins. All that stuff is very people don't realize there's so much athleticism that goes into doing that and coordination and skill. So it was bales of straw, bales of hay, whatever I can get my hands on, or make something enough to give me something. But it just goes to show you the void of like the ground and then the horse, and there's nothing in between. And I always had a lot of frustration with that. So I started my racing career. Bales of straw, bales of hay, not the Equicizer. And I was into my career I was into my second year, and that's when I sustained a pretty bad accident. Badly fractured left leg, and it was down by my knee joint. And the doctor, when you're a jockey, like the first thing you hit the ground, you're like, when can I ride again? That's kind of the mentality you have. And so I remember I just came out of surgery, and the doctor came up to talk to me, and I was somewhat coherent. And of course, that's the first thing I say. When can I ride? And he looked at me. He says, it's not when, it's going to be if. And that just, poof, my whole life, everything that I've worked for just kind of was in question at that time.
Yeah.
And so I had to have a couple of more surgeries. I am recovering. I get scheduled to go to rehab. I'm still on crutches. There's some things that I could do, some things I couldn't do. But when you walk into a rehabilitation center, now imagine you are a cyclist and you walk into a rehabilitation. Bam! There's their next size bike.
Right.
If you play basketball, there might be somewhere you can play basketball. If you're a tennis player, you can hit a ball up against the wall. There's something that bridges the from the ground to, your whatever your goals are. And in this case, horse riders, there's nothing, and it's a big hole. And of course, I wasn't happy with that, and I was frustrated. And so I knew this guy that was pretty handy. I was pretty handy. And I drew something on a piece of paper and I said, can you help me make this? And that's what we did. We went through, we found piles of junk wood, we found springs, and I just kept saying, I needed to do this, I needed to do this. And though I couldn't walk yet. I was just barely walking on crutches at the time. I was able to say, here, and because I knew what I wanted. I knew I need a horse.
Right.
So that was the birth of the very first wooden horse, which I didn't call the Equicizer at the time. It was my wooden horse. And,
okay.
So the rehabilitation process went from very discouraging, very limited, not knowing, hearing my doctor's voice saying it's not, when, it's if. I needed to answer that question. And my knee was where the fracture was, and the hardware they put in my leg, the knee completely locked. So I had, I don't know the degrees, I don't remember, but it wasn't quite a 90 degree. I don't think it was. I could do about that much when I got out of the hospital, and I had to keep working it and get it to a point where if I could ever even get in the jockey position again, it was questionable. And but when I got my wooden horse and I got a saddle on this guy, I was still on crutches, but I could ride my horse. It's not something anybody can say, your doctor cannot let you get on a horse until you're 100%.
Right.
I mean, I was probably 30% and I could get on my wooden horse. That doesn't, I don't get disqualified for that.
Right.
But what I found was I was able to start riding very slow, just mimicking what I would do on a horse. And I was able to work on my knee, and I was able to measure. I know the doctor had given me a tool to try to measure the degrees I get, and I keep reporting, and if I can get a degree here and there. In this case, I didn't have to use that thing. I used the holes in my stirrups. So I could just raise it up a hole when I was getting better. And I'd it hurt, but then I could start riding. And then when it stopped hurting, I could raise it up another hole. And it gave me a really good idea how better I was getting. And, also, I had dealt with a lot of muscle atrophy from the surgeries. And I learned that riding my wooden horse, things were coming back. My muscle tone was coming back in my entire body, not just my injured leg, but my upper body as well.
That's
awesome. So to speed up, a couple of months go by. The crutches are in the closet now, and I'm starting to be able to where I can do a little more exercising, but I could actually ride races on my wooden horse. And that was building up a lot of fitness. It was building up my lung capacity, my cardio, and I was getting fit to ride races. Now that's the other thing, riding horses, races. There's so many exercises you can do, but once you get on a horse, that kind of goes out the window. You're not getting these muscles. You're not reaching those muscles. And in this case, I was reaching those muscles. I was able to work on those muscles I needed. So the neat part about it, to speed up, when I went to go see the doctor for my last appointment, first he couldn't believe how good I looked, fit I was. And he gave me the permission to start riding horses again. And I teased him. I said, well, I've been riding for like 4 months already. He didn't understand. I said, well, I'll explain it. And then when my horse. And he was like, wow, this is really incredible what you're able to do. Once I got the okay from the doctor, the very next day I had my helmet on and I was at the racetrack getting on racehorses.
Wow.
2 days later, I was riding races.
Wow.
So their mind was blown. Generally, jockey comes off an injury, especially something like mine. There's a process, could be 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Are you fit enough yet to start riding races? So everybody was like, how did you do this? And that's when my little wooden horse came to be officially to the world. So that's how it began. Whereas the very page, chapter 1, for example. But then other jockeys started coming to me, and not only the other jockeys, but the best jockeys in the world, the biggest names, and they wanted one for their home. They wanted one in their living room. And that's where, not only does it have to be functional, but if it's going to sit in their living room, I don't want it to be hideous either.
Right.
So that's why the Equicizer kind of looks like furniture, and it still does to this day. Most people, besides, you see all these programs, they'll use it in their barns and stuff, which is fine. But you have the option if you wanted to roll it into your living room.
That's awesome. And
Might
so
match it.
how do you make the Equicizers then? So how do you make them, where it could be in the barn or it could be in your living room? So what's the process?
Well, okay, so a lot of things that, I'm glad you're giving me this opportunity because most people don't understand. It is made like furniture, but not any furniture, because a couch would not hold up to what the Equicizer has to endure, right?
Mhm.
The Equicizer is built with overkill, everything to be able to hold weight, to be able to hold stress, to be able to deal with elements, which is hot or cold, humidity, things like that. So it's built with all those things in mind.
Mhm.
And then it's covered, it's padded and covered in a marine grade carpet,
Oh,
with
wow.
carpet that's meant to be actually out in the ocean somewhere, or in a lake with sun beating down on it for years and years and years. And so it's covered in that material. So that explains a little bit about how it's made and what it's made with.
Mhm.
But then there is the craftsmanship. If you're going to do it right, and if you, and you want it to, if it's going to be in somebody's living room, which in most of my customers, it's going to be in their living room,
Mhm.
or gym or den. And you just want it to be pleasant looking. So the thing is, so I'm still a small company. I'm still a small business, and I haven't found anybody crazy enough to make these things entirely with me yet, because it goes involved. But they're not popped out of a mold. They're not wired. They don't have a sophisticated system. They're
Mhm.
meant to be organic. They're meant to be simple. They're meant to just be very, very simple. You never have to plug them in. You don't have to, there's no maintenance. You just use them. You just ride them, rather than a couch or a bale of hay or a barrel. This is something that bridges that gap from the real thing than what was zero before I
Mhm.
started the Equicizer.
That's
So
awesome.
making process.
So with the horses, because I see a couple behind you, do you kind of have a standard build of the horse, or are you able to customize, the width of whether it's a little bit more of a, well-rounded horse or a little bit more narrow, or is it kind of a standard width for the?
So a little bit of both. It's a standard, and because you never know, especially what I've learned. I thought about all these ideas, making different models, different
Mhm.
feathers, and different saddles. And there's an easy solution, rather than trying to have all these different things that would really slow me down in building the horses, is just put an extra pad on it, for example. People talked about putting a heating system, something to help where they feel the warmth of the
Yeah.
animal. And believe it or not, I mean, you could use an electric blanket rather than spend all the money for me to wire this
Mhm.
thing. Or you'll be surprised how just even riding it bareback, the warmth
Mhm.
that you start feeling automatically from your own body.
Mhm.
It's really all these things that seem like, well, it complicates it, for one thing.
Mhm.
And there was just a very simple solution that would that yeah, and then if you're using for several different riders, you may not want this for one rider, you may not want
Mhm.
this. It's
Right.
just an easy solution. Hey, if you want to like a draft horse, throw an extra pad around it,
Mhm.
and that fattens the barrel up
Right.
really quickly, and 2 seconds, and then you could take it off, and for the next rider that might be extra tight, that would not suit them.
Yeah. So with the Equicizer, I know you mentioned that there are, jockeys worldwide that are using this. There's been some use in the equine assisted activities and therapies industry. What other ways has the Equicizer been used both in the equine industry and out of the equine industry?
Well, it's I never know who's going to order an Equicizer. So we've had from Western, all disciplines of English and Western, dressage, polo, vaulting, movies, museums, television shows. Somebody that's looking for that. What what can we use for this? And
Right.
Equicizers kind of filled in the gap for them as well. But in popularity wise, I would say some riders that if it's for themselves, it's because they're dealing with something and can't get on their horse yet, but yet they had the same issue that I had. There's nothing from the ground to the horse, and this bridge, and this was the bridge for them. Whether it was just getting where they could mount again, but then getting on and then working on their core muscles, working on their flexibility, their rhythm, their seat, their hands, and so that group that's a big area of the market, the people that order the Equicizers. But then we'll get instructors. We'll get them. This will be the school horse for the barn. They have to deal with a lot of students. Horses just are getting, it just is not pretty, right? Your poor horses are getting yanked on and pulled on, and riders are falling off when they shouldn't be. And so the Equicizer is a great way to put them on there, get them to understand what their seat is, what their hands are supposed to do, their alignment, their position, and then let them figure it out on something they can make all the mistakes they went on. Yeah. And then they're the real horse. And then you could pull them off the real horse and say, this is what you keep doing wrong, and on the Equicizer. And again, it's very simple. It's not wired up where it's going to be giving you rider analysis of all these things, but it's organic. So the Equicizer mimics what the rider's doing. If the rider's got a busy seat, the Equicizer is going to be blah.
Okay.
And it's also great to teach a rider how to slow their body down, how to use their soften their back, how to pull and brace on the reins, how to feed the reins to the horse, especially in the canter, where a lot of riders tend to loose tight, where they're bracing on the horse's face every time that their footfall, whatever that is. You would probably know what I mean, but yeah, so that you're feeding your horse and not bracing on the reins, maintaining your position, moving your hips properly. The Equicizer is a great way for instructors to be able to teach that stuff.
That's really, so it's it can tattletale on that hot seat that sometimes we're quickly to blame the horse for when it really could be.
I had two amazing, they're clinicians in the Western English world. And one of them said, this horse is a tattletale. Because if you're doing it wrong, it won't move right. It shows you what you're doing. And the other one called it a lie detector. So I love that. So,
yeah.
This is a lie detector.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's not this horse, it's the horse. Well, it's a inanimate object that's reacting exactly to you. So there's no, it's the horse's fault. Right. That's really fun. So there were a couple people that had heard that we were going to be doing this interview, and someone had submitted the question to you. And they're from the equine assisted activities and therapies industry. And they were wondering, are there any sort of training handouts or training videos for how the Equicizer can be used as kind of like a modality or lesson examples in adaptive riding, or even in more of the PT, OT, incorporating hippotherapy?
Yeah, this is something, it's not the first time this was asked, and it's something that it's been a work in progress. It's right at this moment, I'm working with this other woman. She's past certified instructor, and she's been helping me here and there because she just loves the Equicizer. They have it in their program, and they use it for not only the therapeutic riding, but all their hippotherapy side. So they have instructors using it, and they have their therapists using it. Anyway, she said, you should come up with the 50 top ways to use the Equicizer. Now, I would love that. She wrote it out for me. She just popped off 50 ways that you can use your Equicizer, because I know that a lot of times when someone does get it, you look at it and you're like, well, what does it do? Yeah. And how do I use it? and I do understand that. I can do it, and I've done it in horse racing. It's a tool. How to use it, I kind of like think of it like it's a hammer. You could look at a hammer. What's it? You hit things with it, but you could do a lot more things with a hammer. So most people have been figuring this out all on their own. When they get their Equicizer, they may have thought, I'm going to use it for these students. I got a couple in mind that need this, this, and this. When they get it, they realize, hey, you know who else could really use this? And we can work on his core, or stretch him before we mount, or make sure that he's not going to be a jumper. You know, like you can use this thing. The more you get it and you think about it, it's just a tool in your toolbox. But going back to the initial part of your question, I am working on things that will help kind of bullet point ideas you didn't think of. Maybe you're thinking about getting this for your program that would help you. And if you're the instructor and you want this for your program, how do you sell it to your board members?
Right.
So this type of information, I'm trying to gathered together, and I hope to have some things within the year that'll help everybody, help the whole process.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I've heard. I've seen a couple in person. I've never got to use one directly when I was working at a large center, but I've heard that instructors use them for like the intake assessments, like you said, to see if the kid's gonna, be a jumper and a runner, or can they mount? But building those fundamental skills that can really, in my mind as an instructor, that really promotes equine welfare, and partnering with our equine coworkers of kind of softening that initial gap between a non-educated rider and one that's starting to build the skills. So that's tons of different ways for it to be used. I had a question in my mind and it just went blank. But the weight limit. What's the weight limit of the Equicizer?
So Noah, that's a great question. It's never been officially tested. Like, I don't have a machine that will crush one to see what it would bear. But I've seen, and I've for myself, I've seen up to, I shouldn't say this, probably 1,000 pounds of like people climbing on it. We had a whole vaulting team on this thing.
Wow.
They I don't know how they did. They managed, and just for a photograph. But I've seen many programs, and it easily can handle riding tandem, or even 3 adults riding it. I've seen videos with programs that are, depending on the situation, that they had two I don't know if they were instructors or therapists, but they were riding with an adult rider front facing, and one was on the back behind, and so I've seen it bear a lot of weight. It really can handle tandem, and a lot of programs will use it for that, for those who may not be able to hold themselves up yet, and ride alongside them. So yeah, so safely I'd say 500 pounds.
Great. So this could be a really good solution then for instructors or programs that are maybe looking for an equine related activity for someone who might be outside of the weight limit of the current horses that they have. Absolutely.
A little bit of background is my late wife, rest her soul. We founded our own program here in our town, and she was PATH certified instructor. She had a girl she went to school with. She had MS. She was way too big for the program to ride together at the fair. Sandy wanted to get her on a horse, but we knew we could not. It was just against all the PATH regulations and stuff. But we could put her on the Equicizer. And with time, she was able to build up enough strength that we actually got her on a horse. And it was wonderful. Tears were everywhere, but because of the Equicizer. But there's also, we've had some others that we had an older gentleman that didn't want to ride real horse. He loved being at the barn, ride the Equicizer, and he was recovering from a stroke. And so one of our other instructors worked with him on the Equicizer only. And he got to watch as the other students were riding, the Equicizer was positioned that he could sit there and he could ride, and they could do their routine, working, strengthening his weaker sides and getting some circulation going. And he was very satisfied with just doing that. A lot of programs. We have riders that may have allergies or may not. Maybe we didn't have enough an opening for that rider. But we had a little side thing with the Equicizer that they can brush it, groom it, and participate, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So solutions.
That's really neat. That yeah, definitely problem solving and can really help instructors and centers offer some alternative things.
Absolutely.
So kind of on a side thing, because whenever I talk to other instructors or other professionals in the equine industry, I always like hearing some personal things. And I know you already shared some of your story of how you came to be a jockey and in the industry and how the Equicizer came about. But if you could pass on one piece of advice to a professional, say an instructor in the equine assisted activities and therapies industry, what would that advice be?
I think what I've seen is you have in this industry, you have amazing people, and they get into this because their heart's bringing into it. They're not in this for money. They're not in this for anything, but they want to help. And that's what my wife used to say. She'd say, I just want to help kids. I want to help these kids and these people with disabilities. And sometimes when the noise just got to be more than what you were there for, I have a lot of respect, and I know it goes into this. My advice is that you just stay true and be open-minded. And if you see like one of the thing with the Equicizer, it's a tool. It's a tool, and that's what I've heard. It's a tool in your toolbox, and always you could be open-minded. And it's not for everybody. The Equicizer is not for everybody. Not every tool is going to work for everybody. You can hear my pony whinnying in the background. He's hungry again. But always just be open-minded and stay true to yourself and why you're doing this, and the smiles will come.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So if people want to learn more about Equicizer, what should they do? So I know you have kind of a YouTube channel going and your website. So can you tell us what we can learn from those?
So our website is our main source of gaining more information. And there's an online store that you can do some pricing. There's some other accessories that we offer at this time. And inside there, there's a lot of buttons to push. So depending on what you're looking for, that's kind of the thing about the Equicizer is it's so vast, and it gets back to the booklets. Like if I had to write a booklet for how everybody uses this, I would have booklets for like so many things. And so just, don't get frustrated. Just find what you're looking for, and the information will be there. And never hesitate to reach out to me. I'm accessible. I want to be there. I want to be able to help people decide if this is going to help them, their program, or their personal use. I want to provide them with as much information as I can. And I always say with the Equicizer, reason why we have like 100% satisfaction rate is because I don't just sell Equicizers. I make them for people that want them. And if you're not even sure you want them, I don't even want to sell it to you. I can build horses till the cows come in. So I've got orders. I want people to know what they're getting and that they're happy with it. So I never want to try to just sell something. But the Equicizer website, equicizer.com. We are on Facebook. I know Equicizer is a little tricky to spell. Long story to that, but the spelling of it is Equicizer. And so you can equicizer.com, or we're on Facebook. We actually have a group that I'm building and it's got some great members in it, and they're actually from therapeutic riding programs from around the world. So we've got some programs that are members from Australia, from Hong Kong, from Europe, and all US and Canada that use the Equicizer. It's a Facebook group. It's Equicizer Therapy.
Okay, that's great. So this interview will be going out on my Facebook and YouTube and podcast, and I will link the group that you're talking about and your website. Fantastic. So that people can find it and join in and kind of see what is, how the Equicizer is being used and get ideas, or see if it's a good tool to add to their toolbox. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
So is that and the horses in the back, so you can customize the horses, right, to look like a horse?
Yeah. So I will get I make two models. One is the functional. I mean, it's still very attractive. It's cheaper, but it's made cheaper. It's made to do everything the same. It feels the same, moves the same. It just does not have all the details. So one thing that people don't realize, one part of manufacturing the Equicizer is I actually hand carve the heads and faces. And this whole thing is handmade. So again, nothing pops out of a machine. This is all hand done. So we make another model that's called the Elite model that I just made one for a program that's made after their beloved mare that they used in their program for years, and they had to put her down. So they ordered the Elite, and they send me photographs, and I do my best make it that horse for them. And then we get a personal brass nameplate, that engraved nameplate that would say like, whatever, this one just happened to be a Trigger Girl that thanks to such and such friends of our program. And so we can do that stuff, and that's actually fun for me.
That's really neat. So you could literally have your horse in your house, so to speak.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. Well, thank you again so much for doing this interview, and it's been really fun to learn more about you and learn about the Equicizer. That is such a known name in the industry, and to learn more about it and put a person to the really awesome product that you're delivering. So thank you again, and hopefully our paths cross in person in the future.
I'm sure they will.
Yes, absolutely. So thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. Thank you, Saebra.